Okay, everybody? Everybody? Okay. Started. Welcome members to this meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Welcome officers, external audit and anyone listening in via the online webcast. Please can I remind members, after speaking to turn your mic. So we'll start, David, with welcome and apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Karen Payne and Councillor Bollinger Ball.
Thank you. And on 2 minutes. This is to confirm the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on 10th of December 20. There was one action from the previous meeting relating to complaints, which I believe Angela Wakefield distributed further information relating to the complaint. I'm happy to propose the approval of the minutes from the chair. Do I have a seconder? All in favour?
Abstaining, correct.
Item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? Item 4, petitions, deputations and questions.
On received today, Chair.
Thank you very much. And question 5, questions with notices from members. Thank you. This is quite easy. Notices of motion. Any notice of motion?
None received.
Very much. Right, item 7, internal audit progress report. See, Rachel hasn't got back. I know she's in a meeting and she will be back shortly, so if it's okay, we will move to item 9, the local audit reform date. Kirsty or Andrew to present.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before you tonight is an update paper on the situation for local government audit in particular. What was once a very cyclical cycle feels that it's been made more complex due to the delays and missed deadlines that we've had over recent years, both from external audit and for some councils as well. So I often, I think, come here and tell you this is if it feels complex, it has been made more complex over recent years compared to how it should work generally. So this paper provides you an update with regards to the latest national position. As you'll know from our previous conversations at this committee, this is very much an issue that has been on government's radar for some time, and we are now beginning to see some of the emergence of the ways that government and the relevant stakeholders within the system are putting it right and back on track. This paper therefore brings the committee up to date with this position at a national level and areas that you can expect to see change and also experience change as well. So it looks at the local audit office that was set up earlier in February, I think it was from memory, but also the role of audit committee and council as well in terms of looking at our statement of accounts, some potential change there, as well as wide-ranging to external audit capacity and capability. Our external auditors, in some degree, there's a recognition of a skills, I was going to say gap, but it's more experienced people leaving local government finance as a whole as well, which we've experienced here at the council as well. I would say as well, just to draw attention to Appendix A, I borrowed a diagram from the Redmond review, I think it was, just showing how many stakeholders are involved and how complex the system is as well. And I would just draw attention to local government reorganisation. One of the things that if and when, how that goes ahead is a consolidation of balance sheets. So one of my concerns as a Section 151 is the reliance on the balances that may be brought together. And if the external audits have not been completed, that does cause some doubt with regards to the balances on council's balance sheets. So just to note that for you as well. external audit, Helen is on the line as well. So she's not with us in body, but she's certainly in spirit and on magics of technology. So it does span both of our spheres in terms of the local government audit as well, and she is available if you have questions for external audit as well. I'll open it up to questions at that point.
Yeah, Councillor Payne, thank you.
Yeah. Everybody knows risk, suddenly risk. Audited balance sheets of all possible councils becoming together in a new reorganisation. I would take that as a given. You know, I'm not going to. Seems to me this is not rocket science. We need to know, what we're buying into. So I'm assuming there will be government directives saying you've got to have X, Y, Z, all your ducks in a row before you can go into the second, third or fourth, whatever phase of the reorganisation.
Absolutely, Councillor Payne. I don't disagree with that at all. I think the solutions, and Helen might have a bit more view on this, the solutions that have been put in place were before the knowledge of local government reorganisation. So I have seen, certainly in our trade press, it kind of being a question, what happens if? Certainly the backstop date should help, draw a line under some of the older work. So as we move towards local government reorganisation, that risk should be diminishing. But even so, having disclaimed audit opinions still provides a risk, and having to go back and validate those balances. So I think it's a very real risk for the reasons that you've outlined.
Sorry, Chair, can I ask, what would you think, just off the cuff, would be the minimum year you would go back to? At what point would you say, yeah, okay, it should be okay, or we're not going to do business with these people until they get to a certain point?
It's a really good question, and one that is hard to answer, in that often what will unpick a council's balance sheet, it won't surprise you, is anything capital related and how debt is being financed, linked to that. So that can go back years, and certainly we're often aware of it within our network, where the repayment of debts and minimum revenue provision can stretch back, for as long as you've had that asset in existence. And it tends to be capital or pensions that unpicks a council's balance sheet generally, because of the values involved and the complexity of estimations around it. So either of those 2 points makes a simple question quite hard to answer, because it depends on the value and the risk involved in those balances.
If I may, Chair, I'm going to suggest that this committee needs to make a note of what a strategic director of resources has just said, so that we are prepared when the time comes, as it will. None of us may be on the committee at that time, but we're going to have to look carefully at what's on offer. I'm confident that we're in a good place. Bluntly, I'm not so confident everybody else coming to the table is going to be in such a good place, and we will need to make sure that we know exactly the backstory and the financial situation that we might end up working with, because we do not want to take on other people's debt. That was just not part of this plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Yeah, Andrew.
Thank you. I just thought I'd better come in, because the situation is at the moment being directed by government, and they are not giving us a choice. It is, you will do this, you will do that. And so I agree with you about disclaimed and incomplete audits. And disclaimed are almost worse, because that you might know the reason, but you might not. So I think there is inherent risk in the process that we need to understand. So I agree with your point, Councillor Payne, but I wouldn't want to mislead the public into thinking that we might actually be in control, because we might not. So everything that Mrs. Nutten said is right, but the rider is we might be directed to do it.
if I may. Okay, taking that on board and accepting that, then first of all, we have to make sure that our ducks are in a row, and we have to make sure that we are in a position to, as far as possible, demand the information that we think we're entitled to. And it may well be, again, coming back to this committee, that this committee will need to say to whoever the Secretary of State is at the time, you know, we need some more information. You can't just expect us to hand over our residents' money. We are, you know, the custodians of this. It's not ours. You know, maybe make the central government realise that things are a little bit more complicated in local government than they realise. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Yeah, I'd probably endorse that as well. I mean, I'm not quite sure of the procedures going forward. We understand it's coming from government, but somehow council, either through audit and risk or through scrutiny, I feel needs to be kept informed on this. You as officers and the corporate leadership team need to have that, if you like, backup as well. So perhaps it might be a thought to Andrew, certainly going forward, where we can go that, so we can follow it through, you know, with the members. Councillor Ross.
Thank you. I was actually wanting to talk about audit, but I'll talk about this first. Surely, what will happen is that there will be a coordinating group established to align the work and therefore the balance sheets to a vesting day. That's typically how these things work. So I'm less concerned about that, unless you're going to tell me something. But that's, I think, in terms of what we as councillors need to be cognizant of is that there's an effective group directing the consolidation towards vesting. That's how I see it. And that means that alignment of audit work. I was actually not wanting to talk about that. Actually, I had a question on that later, but I'll come back to that later if I may. I'd just like a bit of clarification on the local audit office, its location and its remit. And the second point I wanted to raise was on 2.8 and the supplementing of private resource with public sector provision in the work, which I thought was an interesting development. So it's really more just a brief explanation, Kirsty. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the local audit office, originally there was for a few years there's been a shadow situation. So you may have heard of Neil Harris working for the FRC, so Financial Reporting Council, and he's been leading on local audit at national level, and the local audit office moved in effect, Neil and his team was moved from FRC and the shadow setup into the local audit office, which is back with MHCLG. And one of the things that you might hear or see around this subject is very much a strong word saying this is not the setting up of the Audit Commission, which was the public arm before, but it feels and looks similar to that, I would say. And that then also links to the point that you've raised in terms of whether there is some public capacity required in the system as well. And again, the Audit Commission used to have their own audit element as well. Now, that isn't being spoken about, and I think quite the opposite. They expect the private sector to fill that gap, but there is a capacity issue within the system that needs to be addressed, and so some solutions need to be put forward, and that's where that idea is coming from about quite how it would work in practice. I'm not quite seeing that, but that's why it's an idea that's been floated around in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to take in my Councillor Ross's point, again, this isn't clear. And from a political point of view, we've been in touch with quite a few Lib Dem councils, some of which have gone through this process already. So Somerset, Dorset, Westmoreland and Furness, for example. And Westmoreland and Furness was the split up of Cumbria. And in those instances, it appears the approach the government took then, which of course may not happen in future, but is an example of what might happen, is that on the day of completion, vesting, whichever you want to call it, the local authority, the new authority, was or adopted what they had been told and given as a balance sheet and as a set of establishment accounts, assumptions. So again, this is the point about government telling people what to do. So the worry I've got, though, and this is speculation, is that there will be so much of it going on. The question is the resource and the ability to do that. So when it's 1, 2 or 3, maybe there's enough time. If it's 20 or more, maybe there isn't. And I think we've just got to be careful to understand. I think there is quite a risk. Personally, my preference from what I've heard of it would be that they actually tell us what our balance sheet is and then give us the starting position so we know the funds we've got, so we know the assets and the liabilities that have already been audited, we hope.
I have to say, Chair, there's a lot of hope going on around this table.
Kirsty, did you want to come back?
Yeah, and I will try not to get too technical, so I'll watch your faces in case you glaze over at this point. But if I think our balance sheet is fairly straightforward, I think it's fair to say there isn't anything too exotic in our balance sheet. So the bigger the authority you go, so I'm thinking of a county council, for example, you'll have to split up highways, for example, and that's done on historic cost. So there's elements like that. Also, when we look at valuing our assets, we tend to have a rolling programme. So absolutely, we can have experts come in and make a valuation as at that balance sheet date. So it's not insurmountable. It's just a lot of work, and we need to work out methodologies for apportionment. So again, debt. You rarely in a council you tends to work more on a treasury cash flow purpose rather than specifically linked to an asset. So again, if you've had to borrow money for a road that stretches over boundaries, you've got to work out a way of splitting that debt, for example. Again, it's not insurmountable, it just needs agreement. And one that we know that has happened more recently is the Northamptonshire case. So and the debt that was associated with Northamptonshire, but I think it's only recently that they've agreed what's happening with the HQ, for example. So something that would seem fairly logical in terms of geographical terms, it has rolled on. So absolutely, like you said, you would expect a project team to be put forward, and I agree with that. That is perfect sense. There's just you can almost see the project plan in front of you and how we're going to validate some of those balances. But of course, working with external audit as well, they have the phrase "not minded to challenge." So what would they expect? Where would they get their confidence from? So it's very much teams working across local government, but also with the external auditors as well.
Councillor Powell?
Thank you. I was just picking up something completely different from this, but not completely different, still to do with audit. And obviously noting the position on backstop dates. And I know we've said this before at this committee, full congratulations to the team for making sure that Rutland, that isn't causing a problem for us. And the other thing, obviously, there's been previous recommendations about having an independent member on audit committees. I understand it's not mandatory, and also more reporting to full council. So I just wondered, we have discussed it before, but I was wondering if there was any sort of line of thinking of whether that's beneficial, whether that's something that we're going to do more of, or whether there's more reports that we're thinking of doing to full council, because I think that's important, and what added value that would get. I don't quite know who I'm addressing this question to, but I'll just throw it over the other side of the room.
I'll try. Absolutely, and that is indeed why I've included it in the report. I think it is for consideration. I think having the function delegated to this committee for the statement of accounts, for example, adds a lot of benefit. So to potentially, the way it reads at the moment, it's just full council would have to consider it, and you're all more than aware of how busy full council can be. Would it get the attention that you bring as an audit committee? So I think it is up for debate, and potentially, and it might just be a direction of travel at the moment, but is there a role for full council as well, like you said, for different reporting potentially from this committee back up to full council and consideration? Might be an interesting point. And sorry to prolong it, Chair, but linking back as well to the simplicity of the accounts is another point that they've brought up there. I find it quite frustrating as a Section 151 that our industry is seeing councils that have become bankrupt, and it's not necessarily from the analysis of the statement of accounts where that's happened. So there is something here about bringing out the importance of our accounts to the local government setting, and I think sometimes we end up debating, or the auditors end up scrutinising areas where are absolutely key, but have a private sector more of an angle to it, as opposed to our council tax raising abilities and the impact on reserves to mitigate some of our risks as well. So I think there is something that should be recognised, and it's beginning to come out about how we better use the information that is within the statement of accounts as well to influence our financial strategies as well.
Can I just ask that really? I mean, when you're talking about reports being considered by full council, would that also affect the role of, how would that apply with internal and external audits, and how may that affect the Audit and Risk Committee going forward? I'm struggling to see the lines with regard to how this goes forward, and also what will happen with regard to the local audit office that I've made a note about is with regard to CIFCA and PSA. When it's all implemented, will their role change as well?
Yep, absolutely. So at the moment, this just considers external audit only. So in particular with statement of accounts, and I assume also that's linked with that is the value for money opinion as well, that we have and that we consider at this audit committee. With regards to the local audit office, I don't think that will cause the council. I'm trying to quickly think, and I'm looking at Andrew as well, just in case he has any inspiration. I don't think that would directly impact us per se, but it does give an increased focus for government on the position for local government in particular, and that I think I've read it's one of the things that they miss from the audit commission days about the specific nature of having that overview of what's happening in local government accounts. So I think it should help. With regards to the PSAA, absolutely, my understanding is that some of the stakeholders, and you can hopefully see them in Appendix A, they will come under one umbrella more. So again, a bit more control and structure behind all the moving parts of the system. So hopefully it should be less complex and more straightforward.
Thanks. Andrew, if government tells us what the balance sheet would be when balance sheets are consolidated, are they likely to indemnify anything that might crawl out of the woodwork following amalgamation?
You're probably the wrong person to ask, because I'm a sceptic on most of this at the moment. I think, again, talking to people like Somerset, Dorset, Westmoreland, Furness, they had post balance sheet event, if that's what you want to call it, issues, because the balance sheets are made up of opinion, really, not necessarily fact, and so you have to be really careful. So one qualified accountant's opinion of what constitutes their balance sheet is different to the next door authority, potentially. So there's plenty of room for disagreement and conflict in this, I would have said, in terms of different opinions, you know, and whether or not people believe what they're being told. So and that would tend to mean there's more of a role for auditors, because the government will be looking, especially if it gets busy. So, you know, both April 26, 27 and 28 all looks quite busy. Looks like multiples of tens of councils changing. So that's a busy period. So you would have thought that there will be some thought to the process, but I wouldn't necessarily have 100% confidence in that. Is that sufficiently sceptical?
I guess so, yeah. I was just sort of wondering what might cover any unforeseen costs that land at a new authority's door as a result of emissions on
I think that's
accounts which are
completely unclear at
consolidated.
the moment.
Yeah.
Unless,
So whether
unless Kirsty
that
has an update that's more factual.
because you know if the government come and say here you go, that's your balance sheet, you go, that's you know those are your assets and liabilities, and then all of a sudden 6 months, 12 months down the line, transpires there might be a few more liabilities, which the authority has to pick up.
I think my default answer would be they would expect you to pick the councils to pick it up and create solutions. I think that is not to say that they would not have conversations depending what the issue was that might come out. But equally, I do know, and again, I think this is in the trade press, so you may have seen it, some debate with those councils. Thurrock, I think, is the one that springs to mind, where, you know, when the councils are looking at potentially who to join, I think the question is who would like to deal with the debt that's on that particular balance sheet, because it is huge in comparison to Thurrock, but also the potential councils that may want to consolidate. So I think there are some specific ones, and they may set precedent. I would say, from my knowledge of councils that are issuing, have in the past issued Section 114s, MHCLG definitely want you to talk to them and to explore options. But that is generally the issue would stay within the local area. I have not seen an occasion when they have sorted out problems for those councils. They just might be able to provide some timing solutions, would be my default guess on that one.
Councillor Powell.
I don't want to prolong this. Just picking up on my first point about having an independent member on this committee, is this something that we should have on the agenda to consider, or is it something that we're going to be required to do in terms of whether that's going to be a benefit? Can we just decide, or is it going to become mandatory? And should we have it on the agenda to consider whether that's beneficial?
I think it is worth having on the agenda. I haven't read that it's mandatory yet, but I've certainly read that it's fit for best practice for us to have an independent panel member. So, yeah.
Again, I don't really want to prolong this thread necessarily, but if I was on the audit committee, I might think that we might want to review terms of reference and other normal operating practices of the audit committee to understand how the audit committee copes with the level of change that's ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. I think that's probably a good idea. Any other points or questions from members?
Okay, then. So this is a recommendation to note, so we don't need to vote on it, but the recommendation is for the committee to note and consider the direction of travel for local audit. So, Rachel, are you got yourself set up? If you are, we will go back to item 7. please, if you'd like to present that for us. Report number 24, 2025. Again, it's a report for noting.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for accommodating a slight move in the agenda items. So the first report this evening is the progress report for the 24-25 internal audit plan. So as usual, there is a copy of this year's internal audit plan on pages 19 and 20 of the pack, pages 3 onwards of the appendix. So we do remain on track to deliver your plan in line with the requirements for the annual report. We have had a further 3 reports that were finalised since the last committee meeting, which I mentioned in section 2. And we haven't had a number of further reports that have been finalised since this was produced. Also within the report is an update on the implementation of actions arising from our audit reports. So Appendix B on page 24 shows that 13 actions have been marked as completed, and there are currently 22 which remain overdue. This is an increase from the last report where there were 18 actions overdue, so we do need to obviously continue to monitor that, and there will be a further update in the annual internal audit report at the next meeting, which will be a year-end position on that as well. So that's, we do have 1 action still within that category of being high priority and over 3 months overdue, which is provided in Appendix C on page 25 of the pack. And again, relates to the GDPR training for members, but I think we only have 1 that remains outstanding now. So, and I believe that this is due to access issues which are being resolved. So,
I believe it has been resolved and you successfully completed it last week.
Yes, so yes, I fully confess, I read this before and thought, okay, it was me. For some reason, the training programme didn't like what I was doing when I was trying to do it here one afternoon last year, and I think I must have had a Wi-Fi blip, and it then prevented me getting back into the training programme and moving on, which took 6-9 months maybe or so to resolve in effect. But it is now done in the last 2 weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, I might note that the chair of the committee in her absence did request the portfolio holder to come to the committee and provide an update with reasons, and we request you to provide reasons why those audits are late. Do we committee consider that a portfolio holder for finance has provided sufficient reason? Oh.
Sorry, can I just check how often we have to do this GDPR training? Is it just once per our term? Just so Councillor Johnson is prepared for the next time.
If I can just make it clear, I was prepared last time, but it didn't like an input and just blocked me out of carrying on. So I couldn't tick the box.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We understand what you're saying. Any further questions, or can we let Rachel continue?
There is a serious point about this, and that is the software is old.
I think a lot of councillors had. I remember myself. We did have problems with it. So perhaps note to the officers. I don't know what's coming next time round, but I know it to be serious. We did have problems. I hope that's been rectified. But yeah.
I must confess, I didn't immediately take it seriously because I'd already done it, and Rosemary's brought up the same question, which is how often do we have to do that training, because that's the second time I've done it. You've done it twice, presumably, as well. Do we have to do it a third time in another year or 2? Does anyone know?
Kirsty, through you, yes, yeah.
There's a couple of, I think I'm just checking a report because we've got a report coming to CLT. I think it's every 2 years, but I can confirm to committee after the meeting. It is one of our regular, Rachel's nodding, it sounds familiar. So it is one of our high priority mandatory training for GDPR. And the other element, Councillor Ross, that you raised is the contract that we've got for the electronic learning system is up for renewal as well. So that is being investigated as well as part of the annual, as part of that contract renewal process.
Thank you,
Kirsty.
So we can expect to have to do it again now, shortly. I think there's a strong message. I mean, it's really important that we do it. We've spent, you know, time discussing it on this committee. Everyone's been going round in circles. So it must be made a lot more straightforward so all councillors can do it, you know, within a month or two of getting the notification, because it's ridiculous the amount of wasted time that has been spent on getting this very important training done. So I think that's, you know, I'm speaking through the chair, whether that's a strong message from this committee that this actually is not acceptable if we're doing online training that isn't functioning, and we're wasting an awful lot of time not being able to do it.
Yeah, we hear that. Yes, I totally agree. Any more from members at the moment, or can Rachel continue with her presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I think those are the key sections. We've also got the customer satisfaction survey feedback in Appendix D. And also just to advise the committee that we have just been through our first external quality assessment of the new in-house Northamptonshire Council Internal Audit Service, who provides your internal audit service at Rutland. So the outcome of that will be presented to the next meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. I'll be bringing the full copy of that report to you. I just wanted to make you aware that that had happened. And we thought it would be good timing with the global internal audit standards coming in April to give us a bit of a gap analysis as well of anything we need to do to align with those going forward as well. So in advance of bringing the report, I can confirm it has been concluded that we are operating in compliance with the standards, which is the best rating we can get. I think it's something like we operate in general conformance with the standards is the best it gets on ratings. So it doesn't sound that exciting, but that is very positive. So that full report will come to you at the next meeting, but I just wanted to make you aware that that has taken place. So I think that's everything from my update today, Chair, unless there's any questions.
Questions from anybody?
I just realised, presumably, with reorganisation, we're going to be saying goodbye to Northamptonshire's services to us. That's another thing that you suddenly realise is going to be dislocated and changing. The more I get into this, the more I can see problems. But okay, fine, great.
Yes, sorry.
Don't mind me, folks. Okay.
Yes, just to confirm, I do cover, obviously, Rutland, Melton Borough Council, where I've just been to their committee this evening as well, Harborough District Council as well within Leicestershire, and parts of Cambridgeshire as well. So, yes, we are seeing all of the potential options that are on the table.
Thank you. I've got a couple of things, if I may, from that item, Rachel. Page 20, continuing care for the children's adult social care. The control, final report's all done, all moderate amber risk assessments there, and this is chatting with Karen as well before she went. I think it might be a good idea if Dawn would like to come in and just go through that and update the committee on the adult social care. It's not a red warning yet, but it would probably be good that the committee was updated on that situation, if that's possible. And obviously, from a good point of view, we note page 26 on Appendix D, always good to get good customer satisfaction. So noted as well, thank you. Any other questions, members? Rachel.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just thought it might be useful to mention that the continuing healthcare was actually a follow-up from last year, 23-24 audit plan, where it did receive a limited assurance. So it is a positive direction in that it has gone up to moderate, but just to provide that context as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So item 7, no vote required, but the committee notes the internal audit update report, Appendix A. Moving on to item 8, to receive the report number 25-2025 from Rachel. The recommendation is that we approve the internal audit plan for 2025-26 and approve the internal audit charter and mandate. Oh, should I have a proposer now?
Can I do it before or after today?
We'll wait. If you do your report, we'll do it afterwards.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. So we have had previous discussions around the audit plan for 25-26. So I brought a paper to the committee in December about the planning process. And we've also had the session earlier today outside of the committee meeting to brief councillors on the audit plan development process and key areas arising from that have made it onto the draft audit plan this evening. So I don't intend to go through the process that we followed again, but obviously the objective was to reach a risk-based internal audit plan that will add value to Rutland County Council. So the process we've gone through is seeking to achieve that, but also making sure that we align with the global internal audit standards in how we're developing that plan and consulting with senior management on where they require internal audit coverage over the next year. We will obviously continue to review the audit plan throughout the year. It's not set in stone, and it's important that we do revisit it regularly. So we do have a delegation already within the Constitution for the Section 151 officer in consultation with the chair of this committee to agree changes which would then be reported to the subsequent meeting of the committee if we needed to make use of that delegation. So the plan is presented to the committee this evening for formal review and approval and starts in Appendix A from page 35 of the papers. The plan itself is obviously the main part of this report, so going straight to that on page 39 in Table 1. I don't intend to go through the audit plan in detail line by line as we have had those previous conversations, but I'm more than happy to expand on any of the areas that have made it onto the plan as to why they are there or what we will be seeking to achieve in terms of assurance. Obviously, there is a nod to some of the horizon scanning that we've conducted during the year with things like the Procurement Act 2023, potential changes around waste collection requirements and the legislation impact on that. We've also noted some of the areas that we've already discussed during this year, for example, the Flood Authority statutory duties, which was postponed from the 24-25 audit plan. And members are, of course, aware of the CQC inspection. We have put some time in the audit plan to give assurances over any improvement plan that arises from that. If, like with the Ofsted plan, we don't need those days, then that's absolutely fine and we can look to revisit that. But we've made provision for that so that we can give those assurances going forward as appropriate. We also have some audits which are of cross-cutting nature, so the procurement compliance, for example. Workforce strategy, I think, is an interesting one and links nicely with your strategic risk register around the risks around recruitment and retention of staff, which impacts on a number of your strategic risks, hence the prioritisation for inclusion in the plan. And as discussed, we've also looked at some of the areas of pressure and performance reporting and so on, which has highlighted areas such as the financial control in relation to SCND provision as well. So the plan includes links to your strategic risk register, but also potential indication of timing of when we would commence the audits as well during the year. There is also provided in Table 2 on page 42 of the pack a reserve list of areas that did come out of that audit plan development process that haven't quite made it onto the audit plan this year. We can revisit them during the year if the risk profile changes and they need to make it onto the audit plan, but obviously anything that's added on would need to have something taken out. So we will continue to review that and report that back to this committee if we feel there's any need to amend the planned coverage. And that's everything that's covered within Appendix A. Appendix B is the Internal Audit Charter and Mandate. So this is another document that comes to this committee on an annual basis. And that is again in line with your terms of reference and the Global Internal Audit Standards. The document has been reviewed since the last time this came to you as a committee and is now aligned with the requirements of the Global Internal Audit Standards, which are more specific in certain areas and includes expanding a little bit around the role of the Audit and Risk Committee as well, so useful for the committee to note those sections. Again, I won't go through in detail, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of the content of the Charter. But essentially, the plan and the Charter provide the foundation of how we will deliver your internal audit service in the year ahead. And hence, it's for your formal review and approval this evening. So I'll be happy to take any questions on either of the documents, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions, members? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Rachel. I think from what you're saying about the charter and everything reinforces that we probably need to relook at our terms, definitely need to relook at our terms of reference. So if we could have that on the future agenda. A couple of very quick questions. How, and I couldn't quite see, in terms of the number of internal audit days that you've assigned, how does that compare to previous years? Are they pretty level? And then I have another different question, if that's okay.
So through you, Chair, the audit days are the same overall as for 24-25.
Okay, thank you. And just looking at one of the items, as you said, carried forward from last year, the flood authority statutory duties. And again, the sort of not linking, but from scrutiny, obviously, we had an evidence panel that looked in quite some depth in that. Will you be referencing that in your report? You'll obviously approach it from a different angle, but there might be some synergies in there. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, through you, Chair. Yes, so one of the reasons that we postponed this review was mindful of the scrutiny review, and what we wanted to do was to use this audit was to actually follow up on the actions arising from that to see how those had been embedded. So that will be one of the key areas that we'll be looking to give assurance on as part of that audit, definitely.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? Okay, I've got a couple through. Again, Karen. She asked specifically about the implementation and effectiveness of the highways plan, which doesn't seem to be included on the work plan. Is that going to be something that she feels that it does need to be included? Is there any reason for that at this moment in time?
So within the 24-25 internal audit plan, we are currently looking at the highways maintenance contract, with it being the first year of the contract's implementation. So that audit's currently underway. So depending on what comes out of that, we may need to revisit some of those areas. In terms of that specific area, that's not something that was highlighted as part of the audit planning process. But it's something I could take away and discuss with management if we do need to know if there's any other assurances that would plug that assurance gap for 25-26.
Thank you. That's a question directly from the chair, so I'm going to suggest you perhaps have a chat and when she gets back. Question for myself with regard to the financial systems accounts payable payroll. Would this also include the fraud section or side of things as per 2.275 on 11 on it's coming up later? We've got the fraud thing later on the agenda, item 11. But the financial systems that you are looking at, will that include the fraud? That's what I'm basically asking.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So every audit that we do, we have an element within our planning document for fraud risks. So we always think about what are the fraud risks in this area and have we covered them suitably within the testing that we've planned to do. So certainly when we look at payroll, for example, we always look at the risks around things like ghost employees and various fraud risks that can arise with payroll. So those are covered off within the coverage and the testing that we perform. So that is one of the reasons that gives some assurance around the council's fraud risk management.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? No. In that case, 8, where we are. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the recommendations? Councillor Payne, Councillor West, first who I saw. Thank you. All in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair. It's carried.
Thank you. Done like 9, so we're getting through. We are now on to item 10 then, to receive report number 29/2025 from the Strategic Director for Resources. I believe Andrew's actually going to present this one, so apologies. So the recommendation is that the committee notes the high-level timetable for the production of the 2024-25 accounts and notes the changes to the accounting policies as a result. Changes to the legislative framework of the accounts must be produced in adherence to. Quite a mouthful. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So as the introduction said, this is an update on the 24-25 statement of accounts in terms of timeline we're working to, but also in terms of a key accounting change for 24-25. So the statutory deadline for producing the accounts for 24-25 is the 30th of June 25 next year. However, the council are aiming to get back to pre-COVID times for all the reasons that Kirsty highlighted in a report earlier. So we are still aiming to produce our accounts by the 31st of May 2025. So that's within the deadlines we worked towards for in previous years, 24-25 and prior. We've never had a problem with hitting that deadline, so we want to, spoke too soon now, but so hopefully that will continue, and we don't want to stretch out timelines just because we can. We will still want to have them relevant and publish as soon as we're ready to publish. We're also aiming to have our accounts audited by the end of September 25, which is significantly before the backstop date of February 26. So again, we're hoping to get back to pre-COVID times. It helps us in terms of financial sustainability, understanding our balance sheet, but also from a workload point of view of the finance team as well. Getting things done, dusted, moving on is a far better position for us to be in rather than having queries outstanding. Moving on to the accounting standard change. We're going to be introducing IFRS 16, which is around rights of use assets. In simple terms, it tells organisations how to account for leases, with more leases being classified as finance leases, so becoming on the balance sheet, and less being classed as operating leases within our revenue accounts. Appendix A does have a more detailed explanation of the key implications in the accounting policy for Rutland, but in simple terms, that's what we've got to try and identify. So this has been on the horizon for a number of years, so it's not coming out of the blue. We've been working on this for a number of years. There has been a significant amount of work, both from a finance point of view, but also working with the services to understand what's in contracts, but also what's going through our ledger, so that we can identify if there are any lease type arrangements that we need to recognise. We've done that. The biggest risk that we've seen at the minute is around IT assets, and we're working with the IT team to fully understand whether any of those do classify as a lease, and do we get the full economic benefits of any of those assets. If we do, we will have to bring them in. It is not expected at this moment of time that there'll be any direct financial implications to the council, other than we'll be recognising assets on our balance sheet that aren't there at the minute. So for Rutland, I'm expecting it to be, touch wood, to be a purely accounting treatment. Other authorities may have different implications on them, but for Rutland, I'm expecting it to be purely accounting. That's what the report is here to brief you on.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Ross.
I'd like to come back to the discussion we had earlier. It's pertinent to the discussion we've had about the timetable that Andrew's presented to us. As you know, I have got no knowledge of the public sector, but this is pertinent going forward. We've got a final audit programme of 14 weeks of activity, and we have an interim audit that is in close proximity to the year end. So my question really is this based upon the lack of resources because of people in the private sector completing, also having a 31st March, and therefore the cost of the audit? Is that the driver? What can we actually do going forward to actually review the period of audit and actually consider possibly, and this is a suggestion, doing audit work in parallel with the completion of the audit, the accounting pack within this council? And I think that these are pertinent observations, given we would be moving towards a vesting date. I'm not suggesting, Andrew, in case you have a heart attack, that this is something I'm suggesting in the next 2 years, but it's something that we should actually plan towards with our auditors as a key objective. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew, through the chair.
What happens through LGR, I think, is going to be extremely difficult to predict. I think, like I said, there would be a project team that would work through exactly how all of these things work. We would still have to close the statement of accounts for Rutland prior the date as at the end of the financial year for vesting day. So we would still have to be working towards those. They would still have to be audited, and then that would feed into the wider project plan of any new organisation in terms of amalgamating balance sheets and what that looks like from the 1st of April in a new organisation. In terms of auditing and could we do it in parallel, I think that would be incredibly difficult, just from a resourcing point of time, both in terms of the council's point of view, as well as from an external audit point of view. From the council's point of view, we have about 8 weeks to produce our statement of accounts. So doing audit on top of that, I think need to double my accountants in my team to probably cope. In certain areas, we're a small team, so doing it alongside it. There are certain things we could probably do more of in terms of interim audit and leave less to final audit, and that could certainly help speed it up. So there are things we can do. I mean, this is the first year we've had an interim audit for probably 2 or 3 years now at Rutland. So again, that's a step in the right direction, which is why our dates are significantly reduced towards the backstop dates. So that's why we're looking at the September deadline, not a lot closer towards the end of the financial year. But it's certainly something we can take forward in terms of can we bring more into the interim audit to reduce the time taken to get an audited statement of accounts.
Thank you. I just think this whole issue of the timing of interim audits, there was a time when there were 2 interim audits that used to take place in order to meet the deadline, and then we moved to one. So I think it's something that's worthy of consideration as part of, how we actually move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
I'd like to come back to 5 years on COVID. I think probably as a committee we ought to acknowledge and perhaps minute that a recognition of the impact that COVID had on the workings of this council and on the work, our officers' actual working conditions and all the rest of it. And I think we're all conveniently in this country trying to forget COVID as if it never happened, and in fact it did happen, and it's still impacting. I'm delighted to hear 5 years on that the impact is diminishing, but I wonder if you could give us some idea, Andrew, when you think we'll finally shake out that impact and get back into a sort of what we'll call the pre-COVID mode.
For me, I think we're not far off it with this getting back to where we are now. I think pre-COVID, Kirsty, I'm looking at you, it was always end of September for audit sign off normally. It would always come to September Audit and Risk Committee.
I think it was a bit before.
Was it?
Yeah. Sorry, Andrew. That absolutely was the case. There was a couple of years. I'm trying to think back now. It must be 10 years ago now. 16, 17. Our dates are put in legislation. So you need an Act of Parliament to change the dates. Going back to your point, Ramsey, about the drivers, we can certainly bring things forward, but you struggle to do things after the date as in legislation. So as Andrew suggested, we are aiming, and there's no reason, touching wood, why we shouldn't be able to hit the 31st of May. That's the point in legislation. They've made a dispensation for this year, given the backstops, etc. as well. So that's one element. But I think originally the audit had to be done by the end of July. So it all got brought forward 16, 17, 17, 18, and there were some councils that managed to do that. But even then, it required, as you were suggesting, Councillor Ross, significant interim audit. So, months 1 to 11 were practically audited, and then, during that traditional audit period, you were just doing the last month. And in order to hit that end of July. And the reason I only remember is because it was like the first summer that I'd had off, without an audit going on. So that's what made me smile, Andrew. But otherwise, before that, it was the end of September.
So we are getting back to pre-COVID timelines, certainly for Rutland. We're aiming to push more and more as much as we can into interim audits, which would help, as Kirsty said, the more we can get back into that. Obviously, we only signed off our 23-24 accounts in February, so we're not quite back there now, but moving towards this new deadline, and if we can achieve what we've put forward, then that will certainly leave us in a lot better position going forward in terms of getting back to those pre-COVID times.
Well,
Partly. I think there's a bit of a perfect storm, to be honest. I think if I could probably trace back to, I don't know if Helen's still on the call, but I could probably trace back to 16, 17 and the bringing forward of the dates that we were trying to target. I've got a feeling that might have been one of the early warning signs that we had. And one of the issues that we have and the auditors, external auditors, have to manage is the NHS audits that come in between. And I find this hard to believe, but public sector auditing is not an attractive career choice, apparently. I know. So hence why, you know, any loss within the system is a knock-on impact, and unfortunately it's local government that comes after NHS audits has tended to be further impacted by it. So I think COVID added to something that I think was potentially already building before anyway.
Chair. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think it is worth noting now and again these things, the impact these things have had on our staff, and I thank them again for making the work, because these things don't diminish by themselves. Somebody's working extra hard to get it done. And also, it just shows how we're working on a bit of a knife edge here in local government, how there isn't any real extra reserve in the system anymore. We've cut it down and thinned it out, and there is a price to be paid for that. And the price is when something unexpected and nasty comes along, and something unexpected and nasty will come along again. You know, we are always trying to juggle too many priorities, and it's not a good place to be for anybody. And I think it's worth noting that we've got to be very careful that we end up in a situation where we're always crisis management. That's not good governance, in my view. But thank you again for all you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Andrew, yes?
Just to, again, being a bit sceptical about the position forward, as well as back, my experience in the NHS was that audit started to have problems in 17-18. That was my local experience. So it predated COVID, as I think Kirsty was saying. The point I'd make, though, is that we've already talked about the financial load that is going to happen as a result of amalgamation of a series of authorities with different opinions on what their balance sheet actually means. So there's going to have to be some consolidation of provisions of what balance sheet events mean within the balance sheets, and how those are all reconciled. Well, that's going to soak up finance resource in a big way.
Yes. Kirsty, yes.
Apologies, Chair, where I'm going to go next with this, because I feel a bit of a doom sayer as well. But we've got the Chancellor announcement tomorrow, and we know there's a spending review coming forward as well. So, you know, the finance team, if we were stretched before, they certainly will be for the foreseeable as well. So it's a risk, and, you know, and this committee indeed deals with risk. So it's one to keep an eye on.
Thank you, Kirsty. Well, I think we all know that, you know, 110%, you know, we're very fortunate, I think, this council, you know, so little pat on the back for everybody. Any other questions, members? Okay, so thank you for that, Andrew. The committee notes the high-level timetable for the production of 24-25 accounts and notes the changes to the accounting policies as a result of changes to the legislative framework. That's all I'm going to say on that. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 11, to receive the report number 27/2025 from the Strategic Director for Resources. And Kirsty to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. And similar to the local audit report, this is for review and consideration by the Audit Committee. You'll remember in terms of I'm pretty sure it was the value for money report from external audit, they noted that this committee should reinstate the consideration of the annual fraud report as well. So this report is coming with that knowledge as well. You'll have read and seen that the report covers the counter-fraud activity for the 24-25 financial year, and the report is broken down into the key fraud risk areas and how the council goes about exercising the controls to counter fraud activity. and I'll leave that for questions, but because you'll have no doubt read the report in some detail. There is one element of the report which was admitted in the drafting just due to the timing, but there's also to note for committee tonight that there has also been an update on the website for the electoral fraud as well. So it's been reviewed and updated this financial year as well. So it outlines the types of electoral fraud, how to report it, so residents and members alike, and how best to protect residents' voting elements as well. So an update for committee that was omitted due to timing as well. And just to note, because I think you all have access to the risk register as well, we've aligned the fraud risk register with the strategic risk register, so it's all in one place and for committee to see as well. So we've brought some consistency across the different registers as well. So I'll pause at that point and happy to take questions.
I think it would be extremely useful for the public confidence in this council if that was on the agenda for council, that report. That's my suggestion, Chair.
Thank you. See Councillor West. Any further questions for Kirsty on that? Okay, thank you. I mean, Kirsty, just from my perspective, looking at it, I'm thinking this is Rutland. I'm quite naive. Perhaps people should concentrate more their minds on getting good jobs and well-paid jobs against the grand ideas of fraud. So, yeah, it's quite an enlightening report, and yeah, thank you very much. No further questions on that, everybody?
Sorry, Chair, just one quick question. I was just looking to see if I could find it. The underlying policy, which was September 18, I was just wondering when that was due for review. Seems like that's quite a long, it seems like, I was just having a quick look to see if I could find it. That seems like quite a long time ago.
It is, Chair, and I will definitely come back and report to committee, but I have a feeling I did seek it out, and it's 2026, because I too thought similar. It's due a review, but I can confirm it is on the front page of the policy as well, of when it needs to be reviewed. So it is coming up as you suggest.
Okay. So the committee is asked to receive the counter fraud update report covering the period from April 2024 to March 2025 and note the work undertaken by service areas during the period covered by the report. That now brings us on to item 12, to consider the committee's work plan and items for future meetings.
Yeah, so this was a request from the chair for me to produce a document so members were aware what obviously the timeline looks like further down the line rather than just getting a meeting agenda. So this is for input. I've heard tonight obviously members wish to discuss potential terms of reference for the committee, which I can obviously add to this and discuss outside the meeting if that's something that can be done in a committee setting or that can be done outside of the committee setting. I can obviously let members know about that. If there are other items that members wish to be added, then obviously please let me have them and I can add them on. Or
I think as Councillor Powell mentioned, the independent member for also.
Yep, I'll definitely look into that. I've already got that listed down as a note to take away for tonight, so I can look into that for members and see how we best approach that one. Anything else that members wish to be on there that's not on there, Councillor Powell?
We did look last year, and I thought we were going to have it on a annual basis, the contracts register, to see if there are any specific contracts that we actually wanted to have a look at. Oh, sorry. Am I on the wrong committee?
No. It's usually me that suffers from the senior moments.
If If perhaps Ramsey would like to answer that question.
Perhaps you'd like to retract that
Oh,
statement, Councillor Ross.
sorry, that was a Freudian slip.
Apologies, I withdraw that statement.
I withdraw this.
I'm so pleased to hear that Councillor Ross is on the ball on this. Thank you.
It's one of the few things.
Kirsty, yes.
Chair, if I may, there is an element, Councillor Pell, I believe it was brought up again in the external audit report regarding waivers with regards to contracts. So I think there is an element for this committee, in particular with regards to contracts. There was, I think there's three for the life of me, I can't remember what the other two were, but waivers and the controls around some of the contract procedures, you know, as a reporting element back to committee.
Chairman?
Thank you, yes.
Coming back to reorganisation again, which I start to see as a very big black cloud floating above us, maybe we ought to come up with some strategy whereby we keep monitoring it on an active basis rather than waiting for something to flop down in front of us in a rather ugly lump. Because I get the distinct impression that this is being made up as it's going along, and I'd like to be ahead of the game as much as possible rather than reacting to it all the time.
David, I mean,
Sorry, David.
Well, it just depends if that's within the remit of this committee to do that or not, which is debatable. Oh, so yeah, so proposed items not assigned to date. There is an update on the local audit regimes that you're referring to, Kirsty.
Apologies. It's a local government reorganisation, so that's second table. So a future risk to the council. So depends. I think it is a watching brief potentially, and then to bring to committee if there's any change in that risk profile for the council for local government reorganisation. Like you said, part of the issue is we don't know what we don't know. So it's just how we capture what to report to committee.
I think that's basically what I'm saying, that we have an active watching brief, that, you know, we are increasingly going to be coming up with this on a regular basis, I think, and we should acknowledge it, accept it, and embrace it. And that, you know, that's do what we can to influence things and see off problems before they arise. I think we've already flagged up that one or two things that could cause this committee quite serious troubles, unaudited accounts from our nearest and dearest neighbours.
I agree. Councillor Ross?
Just an observation. I think we there's consensus that it should be fact-based, and a lot of information is still to come out. There's a lot of water flowing under the bridge. Blah 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 blah. There needs to be a watching brief. I understand that, but it needs to be based upon official information, not speculation. You know, government, one would assume, has a programme that is working to, although that's is an assumption. But that would be my plea.
Councillor Johnson's got a response to that.
Yeah, just in the latest letter, which I think was received Friday, I think, there is a more detailed timetable specified from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are, you know, the only things we're going to get back are things from government. It's going to be imposed upon us, but at the moment, as I personally see it, is that obviously at the moment, corporate leadership have put in our offer, but we know there's other things on the table that council leadership are going to be considering. We've been advised of that matter, so I think in respect of the other items that are on the table, though we've not improved or not recommended it or we've not gone that route, I think we would want to know information, if possible, that's relevant to the other items that have been proposed by our fellow councils. If that's okay.
Yeah, just last couple of things from me. On the training aspect for members, I know we was Andrew and myself need to get a date and a diary for statement of accounts / treasury management training for members. So we'll look to put a date and a diary for that. It probably be before a committee meeting in the future. And then the last thing from Councillor Payne was on this item that she told me to bring up was to regards to the mid-year treasury update. Should we have a full update also? Question mark was a question from Councillor Payne. And that was, yeah, and that was all on that item.
Any further questions, members? Okay.
Thank you. That brings us then to item 13. Any other urgent business, David?
None received, Chair.
And then the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, 24th of June, 2025 at 7 p.m.
And I'm able to close this meeting at 2017 hours. Thank you, and I hope that I've not forgot anything that Karen gave me instructions to remember. Thanks, everybody.